Welcome to Vital 100, the podcast designed to take your health to the next level.
Well, hello, this is Dr. Bob Johnson again, and we have a very special guest for us today, a Dr. Magda Havas from Canada, who has done a huge amount of research on a very important health topic, that of electromagnetic frequencies. Hello, Dr. Havas.
Hi, Bob.
I want you to give our audience a little bit of your background, and then we'll get into some of the really critical issues with respect to EMFs and all the electrical smog that we're dealing with. So give us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, I'm an environmental toxicologist, and for the past 40 years I've been studying the effects of contaminants in the environment on, people, plants, and animals. My early research was looking at water quality and air quality and looking at metal toxicity, acid rain, that sort of thing. And about 20 years ago, I shifted from chemicals, electromagnetic pollution. And so for the past 20 years, I've been looking at the harmful effects of electrosmog, and more recently looking at some of the beneficial effects of electromagnetic frequencies. So my research deals with the good and the bad of electromagnetic energy.
Wow, that sounds like it's going to be not only a problem now, but a bigger one in the future.
It sure is. We've been exposed to electrosmog since Edison invented the light bulb and Tesla invented alternating current. But it's become a lot worse ever since World War II, when we had radar used for the first time. Radar uses microwave radiation, and initially that was our first exposure to man-made microwaves. But today we have microwave transmitters in our homes, our cell phones, our mobile phones, Wi-Fi, wireless baby monitors all use microwave radiation to get information from one location to another. So we're surrounding ourselves in a sea of microwaves, and the guidelines that were established back in the 1970s were really based on protecting military personnel and people who were occupationally exposed to large microwave heaters. We now have those microwave heaters in our home, and they're called microwave ovens. They used to be called radar ranges because radar and microwaves are, roughly at the same frequency. So we're surrounding ourselves with this technology. The guidelines haven't changed, and there are a lot of people who are now becoming quite ill.
Now, is this what they call electrosmog?
Yes, this is one type of electrosmog. Electrosmog refers to artificial man-made devices that emit electromagnetic energy. The microwave is just one part of the electromagnetic spectrum, but it also includes radio frequencies and extremely low frequencies and intermediate frequencies. So what we're really talking about with electrosmog are forms of man-made, non-ionizing radiation that are in our environment.
And how does this affect people's overall health? And I'm sure different types of electrosmog have different effects on our health. Talk about that.
They do. Different types of electrosmog have different effects on our health. And I actually divide electrosmog into 4 different categories. There's the extremely low frequencies that come from our use of electricity, for example. So as soon as you plug a lamp into a wall and there's current flowing through that lamp, there's going to be a magnetic field and there's going to be an electric field. So that's one type of electrosmog. Another type of electrosmog is a combination of radio frequency and microwave frequencies. Those are usually linked together, and sometimes microwaves are actually called radio wave frequencies. And these are much higher frequencies. They flow through the air, and they have, once again, they also have biological effects that I'll discuss in a minute. A third type of electrosmog is called intermediate frequencies, which is in between the very low and the microwaves. And that, a common name for that is dirty electricity. And this flows along wires too, and it's generated by electronic devices. And the fourth type that very few people talk about is called ground current. And this is basically electricity flowing through the ground that has effects that are mostly noted on farms and mostly on dairy farms, but they occur in cities, and they affect not only animals but humans as well. The three key effects of electrosmog include cancers. So there's a range of cancers that are caused by both the low and the high and the intermediate frequencies. The second major category are reproductive effects. We know that wireless technology, keeping a cell phone in your pocket, can affect your sperm, for example. That's been documented in several studies now. And the third type of effect, which is perhaps the one that's most controversial, is electro-hypersensitivity, which includes a lot of different symptoms that people may have because they have become sensitized to this radiation. And so depending on what their physiological weaknesses are, that's how the symptoms are going to manifest. So some people develop headaches, other people can't sleep, they become incredibly tired, other people experience pain throughout their body. Some people have mood disorders like depression or suddenly an anxiety attack that they can't explain. So the symptoms vary from person to person, but they all seem to be affected by electromagnetic pollution.
Now, is there anything in certain people, that predispose them to electromagnetic hypersensitivity?
There are, as a matter of fact. A lot of people who have already developed multiple chemical sensitivity tend to be sensitive to electromagnetic pollution as well. People who are either very young are going to be much more sensitive. The elderly may be much more sensitive because their immune systems aren't as well developed in both cases. People who have had electrical trauma in the past, whether they've been electrocuted and not died, people who have been struck by lightning and have survived become electrically hypersensitive. So people with an electrical trauma, people with a chemical trauma. Mercury is a really bad culprit in this because we have mercury fillings and we eat fish and other products that have mercury in them. The more mercury you have in your body, the more likely you are to develop symptoms of electrosensitivity. Mercury, as you know, is a neurotoxin, and it turns out this electrosmog affects our nervous system, which are electromagnetic in nature. So the two of them interact synergistically. But pesticides that are fat-soluble will have the same type of effect. People who have had biological trauma, individuals with Lyme disease, for example, or other types of microbes in their body, are going to become potentially electrically hypersensitive. So it actually affects a fairly large number of people, and the estimates globally range from something like 3% of the population may be severely electrically sensitive to the point where they can't survive in the type of environment that you and I live in with, the wireless technology in our home and the wireless technology outside of our homes. And then about another 35% have mild to moderate symptoms. So a third of our population right now is likely reacting to this electromagnetic pollution without even being aware of it. They just assume that their symptoms are natural because they're getting older. And I actually refer to electro-hypersensitivity as rapid aging syndrome because a lot of the symptoms we have, we simply say, well, I'm getting older, so it's people who are older don't sleep as well, they wake up with aches and pains. But if these individuals go into an environment that's electromagnetically clean, they sleep better, they have fewer pains, they can think more clearly, so they don't have this brain fog that a lot of us experience, and they feel all around better. And so I think this is really affecting a very large population.
So is there any lab tests or anything you can see on like a blood test or whatever that can make you suspicious that someone is electromagnetic sensitive other than just their history?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there is, and that's really what my research is focused on. How can we objectively measure electromagnetic hypersensitivity? And we've done a number of experiments with this that are peer-reviewed and published. One of them, you mentioned blood. One of the studies we did was actually looking at blood. I find that when I started testing my own blood, because I was interested in actually testing products that are beneficial, electromagnetic products that are beneficial to your health, that we can talk about some other time. But one of the claims made is that with this device, is that if you take a blood sample, just a pinprick, and put it under the microscope, you can look at your blood morphology and how the cells are behaving. And ideally, you should have nice red, round blood cells, all the same size, and they should be free-floating on the slide. They should be moving around and not connecting and joining up with each other. And when I first did this test on myself, I realized that my blood was sticking together. It was like coins of blood cells sticking together. And I realized that when I did the test, I had been working on the computer. And so I repeated it the next day under much more controlled conditions. And when I sit in front of a computer for, half an hour or longer, my blood goes into rouleau formation, so the cells stick together. But it gets even worse when I'm exposed to wireless technology. So if I use a cell phone or a cordless phone, there are virtually very, very few cells, a very low percentage of cells that are free-floating in my blood, and that's from a pinprick. And I've done this over and over again. It's incredibly reproducible. 10 minutes after I've stopped using a device, if I'm in an environment that's electromagnetically clean, my blood returns to normal. And so the cells don't stick together anymore. Now, if your blood is in rouleau formation, there's all sorts of consequences to that. Some of the symptoms that you might experience include tingling in your extremities, cold extremities, potentially pain in your fingers and toes because this part of your body isn't getting the right amount of oxygen and the waste products are accumulating. They're simply not moving around as quickly because your circulation has been impaired to a certain degree. However, there are more serious symptoms, things like brain fog. If your brain isn't getting the right amount of oxygen from the cells in your body, then that could be a possible outcome. But there's more serious ones like blood clots in your brain. If your blood is sticking together, it's not going to flow through as quickly through your capillaries as quickly, and possibly heart conditions as well. So people who are predisposed to strokes, for example, or have other circulatory problems that might result in a heart condition, then this can be very, very dangerous.
So before we get into what can be done for these people, that's going to be very important to discuss that. Talk to me a little bit, since it's so prevalent, talk to us a little bit about dirty electricity and your research on the dirty electricity.
Well, my research on dirty electricity started about 12 years ago. I received a phone call from a woman in Toronto, and that's about a 2-hour drive away. And we had just published a paper on magnetic fields in different communities, and that was picked up by the Toronto Star. And so she got my name from the Star and knew that I was doing research in this area. And she called me and told me that her daughter was electrically hypersensitive and had just started going to a new school, and she was feeling so sick at that school that she had to come home at noon, and she spent the entire afternoon sleeping. So her daughter wasn't getting a good education. And she said to me that they had made a number of changes in their home that really helped her daughter. And one of the changes was installing filters in electrical outlets. And I had never heard about these filters, so I was a little bit skeptical about that aspect of what she was talking about. And she told me that she got permission from the teacher or the principal of the school to put these filters in the school to help her daughter, because she felt that it was the dirty electricity in the school that was causing these symptoms for her daughter. But she thought that other people would benefit as well, and she thought it was worthy of a study. So she contacted me to ask me if I would do a study at the school to find out how many people would respond to the filters. Now, I was extremely skeptical that these filters would have any effect on the teachers, But I really respect parents and grandparents who care so much about their children that they're, willing to go that extra mile to ensure that they, they're healthy, they get a good education. And as a scientist, doing a study that shows that there are no effects is as valid as doing a study that shows that there are effects. So I figured, even if we find that these filters have no effect, that's valuable in terms of science. So I agreed to do the study. We set it up as a blind study, so the parent or the teachers in the school had no idea what we were doing. And we explained to them that we needed them to complete a questionnaire at the end of the school day, a very short questionnaire that wouldn't take them, more than a couple of minutes to complete, that told us about their health and that told us about the behavior of the students in the last class that they taught. And this school went from grade 1 to grade 12, so it included all the different grades. When we completed the study, initially when we did the study, we had the background level, so there weren't any filters installed. We then installed the filters when the teachers weren't there on the weekend. We had the help of a custodian. And then we took the filters out again to see if there was a change before and after. And when I started looking at the data, I was absolutely stunned by the results we were getting. And I thought I must have made some mistake, because 50% of the teachers who responded to this questionnaire improved only while the filters were installed. And they had no idea, what we were doing. They actually thought we were testing their teaching skills rather than, doing something to their environment. And so I was really intrigued. We then repeated the study at 3 schools in Minnesota and found virtually the same thing. This was with a larger population. And by then, the manufacturer of the filter actually made dummy filters for me, so that this time we could actually tell them, we're putting something in the wall. We're seeing if that improves the quality of your environment. And so we had filters in all the time. Some of them were internally disconnected, so they had no effect, and some were connected and they were working, and the teachers had no idea which was which. When we looked at our results, 35% of those teachers improved dramatically, some of them dramatically, when the filters were in. And I remember one teacher told me that she had a terrible case of eczema, and her eczema cleared up after the filters were put in. So we were getting absolutely remarkable changes. When it came to student behavior, we weren't able to get health information on individual students because of their age and ethical considerations. And so we simply got information on the behavior of the class that these teachers were teaching, and we knew whether it was grade 1 or grade 5 or grade 12, and where the class was, so we could go back to the individual classrooms. We had measurements for all of the classrooms. And we found that the greatest improvement was in kids that were in either the science class or the computer lab. So these were the labs that had the most electronic equipment in them. And the greatest response was also from some of the younger children, which is what we found in the school in Toronto that we measured too. So the younger children were benefiting a lot more from the filters than were the older students. Now, the first time we did the study, cell phones weren't common in schools, so kids didn't have cell phones. Some teachers may have had them, but they weren't as popular as they are today. By the second time, by the time we repeated the study in Minnesota, some of the high school kids actually had their own cell phones. So we think that probably interfered with the results. So it basically counteracted the effect of the filters, because the filters were only cleaning up dirty electricity in the school. Our research on dirty electricity continued because those results were so dramatic that we started working with people with multiple sclerosis. In a school in Wisconsin, they had something called sick building syndrome, and the teachers and students complained of various health effects, from asthma to headaches to foggy brain. And they believed it was something in the school, and they thought it was either a combination of mold and toxic chemicals that were used in cleaning fluid, that sort of thing. And most times when we think about a sick building, it's usually a combination or one or the other of those things. And the school had done nothing about this, so the teachers decided that they were going to get their union involved. And when that happened, the school said, okay, we're going to have to clean things up. So During the summer, they got people in there. They disinfected everything. They got rid of a lot of the toxic chemicals, and they got rid of carpets and things of that nature. And when the teachers came back in September, they started feeling the symptoms again. So whatever was there hadn't been removed. And they called in a power quality expert who measured the school and found there was a lot of dirty electricity. And once again, this was pre-cell phone use in the school environment, and it was pre-Wi-Fi use. So there was very little radio frequencies and microwaves that were in the school. And he said, well, we can clean this up with filters. So they allowed him to install filters in the school. I don't remember what the entire cost was. It was several $1,000s. And the teachers and students had no idea this was going on, but they started improving. And we found out about this improvement when a parent called the nurse in the school to find out if Johnny needed to have his inhaler replaced. I can't remember the exact number, but something like 23 students in the school were using inhalers for asthma. So childhood asthma is a very serious issue these days. And every time they used an inhaler, they had to got their inhaler from the school nurse. And so she kept a record of it. And so a parent phoned, and, does Johnny need his prescription refilled? And the nurse said, well, no, Johnny hasn't been in for quite a few weeks. And this was kind of weird. So because Johnny was still using his inhaler at home. And when the school nurse looked at her records, she found that of the 23 students, if that number is correct, of the 23 students, only 3 of them were using their inhalers for asthma and only for exercise-induced asthma. So when they were going to their physical education class, that's when they used their inhalers. So this is really quite odd. And they were still using their inhalers at home. Now, one of the principals at the school had multiple sclerosis. And her symptoms were so bad that she was planning on retiring at the end of that school year. And she was quite young. I think she was probably in her 40s or late 30s. When the filters were in, and they were in now constantly, her MS symptoms began to diminish. So she was walking better, her balance improved, her cognitive abilities improved. But that's when she was in the school. But when she was out shopping, they came back. So she was really intrigued by this, and we decided to do a study with MS because some people with MS who have gross motor skill disabilities, we can actually measure that quite easily, and we can videotape it. So I started working with MS patients, and I told them this wasn't a double-blind placebo study. I basically said, I have these filters. This is what they do. We don't know if they will affect your symptoms. Would you like to just try them? And I did this like one person at a time because I didn't want to do anything that would potentially harm anyone. And the very first person I worked with, I gave her my home phone number, and I said, call me if you have any questions. And the day after and so for a couple of weeks before, we found out what their symptoms were, and they documented their symptoms on a daily basis, how severe they were, and whether anything in the environment could have accounted for their symptoms becoming worse or better, because stress also affects MS symptoms. And the very first person, the day after we put the filters in her home, this is a person who used a cane to walk with. Her balance was off. Her mental thinking was quite good, but physically she was in pretty bad shape. And she called me, and I thought, oh, my God, something's happened. She's fallen. And she said, I'm improving already. And in my mind, I thought, okay, this is the placebo effect. This is why we do double-blind studies, because people want to improve, and they think they're improving, and it's all in the mind. And so I started asking her questions, and I said, well, can you tell me why you think you're improving? And she said, well, the other day, my daughter mentioned this to me. She said, whenever I carry something, I can't carry something from the kitchen to the dining room because I need to walk with a cane or I need to hold on to the wall, so I can only use one hand to carry something. And her 13-year-old daughter said to her, Mom, you're carrying something, you're carrying a dish to the dining room. She didn't have her cane, and she didn't even realize she didn't have her cane. And she said the worst part of these filters was she kept forgetting where she left her cane because she didn't have to use it all the time. She then told me that she was able to bend down and take items out of the lower part of her fridge. And I said, well, what would have happened to you normally? And she says, well, if I bend forward, I fall forward. I don't have balance. And then she said, I can turn around, I can make a 3-degree sort of spin around and still stand up without a cane. So her balance and her gait were improving enormously. We worked with at least 3 or 4 other people before I realized I needed to videotape this, because the results were so dramatic. This was not psychosomatic at all. And if psychosomatics played a role, then, that was all for the better. But I started videotaping people because I would go to their home one day and I would return several weeks later, and they were totally different in my memory. And I thought, no one's going to believe me, because I was having difficulty believing my own eyes. And so we videotaped them, and those videotapes are available on YouTube, where, there's a before and after with no change in medication, no change in anything else. And it's really quite dramatic.
So it sounds as if we all could benefit in the home or where we work or in the schools by these filters.
Definitely. I have them in my home. I sometimes travel with them, so when I stay at hotels, I take 3 or 4 filters with me. And that's at least one of the things that I can control in my environment. So the information about dirty electricity, the news about it is quite good. It does affect us, which is not good. But there are fairly inexpensive ways of cleaning up your home that doesn't require an electrician to come in. It's something that you can do yourself. This is a positive news story. We also worked with diabetics, because one of the people that I have come to know who's electrically sensitive told me that his symptoms improve dramatically. His blood sugar improves dramatically if he's living in a filtered environment. And if he goes out and is in an environment where there's a lot of dirty electricity, then his blood sugar increases. And we know from studies that electrosmog causes physiological stress to the body. So anything for a diabetic, anything that will generate stress will also increase blood sugar levels. We think that's the connection there. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, how easy is it to acquire or buy these filters? And obviously you can transport them if you're traveling from your home to your business or in vacation.
Right. Well, the filters are available through a company called StetserElectric.com, STETZER, or ZER, I guess, in the United States. So StetserElectric.com, they're the ones who designed the filter and are distributing it in the United States. And the filters are about the size of a cell phone, but much thicker, and you simply plug them into an electrical outlet. And what they do is they short out the high frequencies. So these high frequencies are converted into heat. So there's a slight buildup of heat right where the filter is if you have a lot of dirty electricity. We now know the values. There's a meter that you can also measure it with that's inexpensive. And so you can measure the dirty electricity in your home. You can plug filters in and you can see it drop instantly, like it's an instant sort of sparking effect. And so it's not something that you have to, rely on your body to tell you, do you notice a difference or not? You can actually measure the difference. It should help anyone who's in an environment with a lot of dirty electricity, and most of us are, because electronic devices generate this. So if you have energy-efficient fluorescent light bulbs in your home, the compact fluorescent light bulbs, they produce a lot of dirty electricity. Computers and electronic equipment produce dirty electricity, so we're actually generating it within our own homes.
Does every outlet have to have one of these in it, or just one in a room, or?
No, what you have a number of different circuits in your home. Some people, depending on the size of your home, might have 8 or 10 circuits. And so as soon as you clean up one circuit, so if you plug a filter into one circuit, that cleans up that entire circuit in the home. So if, for example, in my home, one of the circuits in my bedroom is the same circuit that runs through part of my kitchen. So when I clean up my bedroom, I clean up part of my kitchen as well. So it cleans up the entire circuit. And you might need 1 or 2 filters per circuit. So depending, once again, I've been in homes where they have multiple panels, and very large homes, very expensive homes where they have a lot of circuits, and obviously they would need a lot of filters. But most homes, anywhere from 8 to 20 filters should do it. And I think the cost of a filter is around $40 or $35. So if you only need 8 filters, then, it's a few $100, but that cleans up your entire home for everyone who lives in it.
Do you know if there's something that if someone is out exercising or if someone is out and about, they can wear something mobile that can filter out the ambient electromagnetic smog?
There are a lot of devices that are being generated like that, and I've been asked to test a few of them. And one of the things I've noticed with testing is that those devices are working at a different level of energy, and I'm going to call it subtle energy for lack of a better word. And so if you take one of those devices and either put it on your body, you wear it as a necklace, or you put it on your phone, or you put it on your computer, we can't measure changes in the electromagnetic radiation that's generated by your phone or your computer or anything like that. So we don't measure that. So one of the things we've started doing is we measure the person. And if you have the device on versus if you have it off, does it affect your heart rate variability, your autonomic nervous system? Does it affect your blood, that sort of thing? So we started doing some measurements, but there are so many devices out there. And of the few that we've started testing, and we haven't done anything really dramatic with a lot of people, so I don't want to give away information that may not be ultimately accurate in the end. But one of the things we're finding is that the response of individuals is very individualistic. So while one person wearing that necklace around their neck that's supposed to protect them against electromagnetic pollution, it might work for one, but it might not work for another. And some people who are extremely electrically sensitive are so aware of their environment that they can usually tell as soon as they put it on whether they feel different or not. So basically my advice to people is, until there is proper testing of these devices, is that if you happen to purchase one and you can tell the difference, then make sure you purchase it with a money-back guarantee, so that if you're not feeling anything different, if you're not feeling better, ask if you can return it. Now, one of the concerns I have with people using these devices on their phone who can't sense anything is they then think, okay, I'm being protected, so I can use my cell phone twice as long as I normally would use it. And if there is no protection, then they're being exposed twice as much, with potentially twice as much damage to their body. Right now, the answer is, do these devices protect you? I think some devices protect some people, but that's about as far as I can go.
Well, we'll certainly get the information to people and the ability to purchase these different devices, whether they're the filters or all those technologies that can really help them, because it sounds like more people need them than they may realize.
I agree. I test a lot of different technologies, meters and filters and screens that are supposed to shield microwave radiation. I just want to make it really, really clear. I don't have a connection with any of the manufacturers. I don't get any kickback for any products I recommend. And very often I test the products that I want to test rather than someone wants me to test. So, there's no financial benefit to me. And I think that's how I stay true and honest to the recommendations I make, is that I'm not making them because I benefit from them financially. I just wanted your listeners to be aware of that.
Well, thank you very much for saying that, and that certainly does make it easier to recommend these things because the research shows that they're effective.
That's right.
So talk a little bit about cell phones, and I know they affect not only the brain, but what you found what the effect is on the heart.
Well, we started working, once again, I work with people who are electrically hypersensitive, and I use them very often when scientists do research. They're arrogant to think that they know what's going on, and they set up a study, and they're not really testing anything appropriate. So with electrically hypersensitive people, because they're all so different, you can't do a mass study and check for the same thing in everyone because they're not going to respond the same way, and you're going to end up with negative results. So what I do is I work with individuals one at a time, and I find out what their symptoms are, how severe they are, what affects their symptoms. And then I try to do a study that will allow me to measure the changes that they experience. So if someone gets a headache, there's not a lot I can do about it if that's their only symptom, because I don't know how to measure a headache. But if they have heart palpitations, that's something we have technology that we can measure. And a lot of people who are electrically hypersensitive complain about heart palpitations. And some of these people tell me that they can't go into stores because they become sick really quickly. So when they do go into these places, they have a list of everything that they need. They get the items really, really quickly and then leave the store as quickly as possible because their symptoms become progressively worse the more time they spend in the store. And one symptom are heart palpitations. So basically what we did is we hooked people up to heart rate variability monitors. Some individuals who claim they were sensitive and some individuals who claim they weren't, so we wanted to have a combination of both. And we exposed them to radiation that comes from mobile phones that you have in your house. Now, these mobile phones are called cordless phones as opposed to cell phones. So both cell phones and cordless phones are mobile because you can walk around with them. Now, the cordless phone that you have in your home sits on a base, and that's called the base station. That base station in North America is constantly emitting microwave radiation, whether you're using the phone or not. And it's probably one of the most dangerous things that you can have in your home for microwave exposure. The Wi-Fi is another, and wireless baby monitors are another, but most people have these cordless phones to make it convenient for them to, pick up a phone in any room that they might be in. So this base station emits constantly, and so that's what we used as exposure. So we either plugged it in or unplugged it or plugged it into a dead outlet. So people would be lying on a massage table, and we would take this base station, put it about a foot or two away from their head, and we had them hooked up to a heart monitor, and we could simply record their heart, not only their heartbeat, but also their heart rate variability. And we could measure their sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And so we did this research with 28 people in Colorado, and we found that a percentage of those individuals, now some of those claimed they weren't sensitive and some of them turned out not to be sensitive, but a percentage of those individuals started having a rapid heart rate. And the most severe went from about 65 beats per minute while they were lying down to 120 beats per minute when we turned on the radiation. And there was no way that they could tell when we were turning on the radiation or not, and their heartbeat just suddenly started to race. So and when we looked at their sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, there was a sympathetic upregulation and a parasympathetic downregulation, which means that they were in a fight or flight response. So their body, something was telling their body, there's danger, you've got to run. And this is what is causing the anxiety attacks that people are having. And it was reproducible. So, when we unplugged it, it went away. When we plugged it in, it started again. So when they were exposed, they had the symptom, and when they weren't exposed, they didn't have the symptom. And it was done totally in a double-blind fashion. So the doctor who was actually examining the charts that we were producing had no idea who was exposed when. And he would tell us that, okay, during this interval, this person is in, cardiac distress. Or, this is a mild case of a slight irregularity in the heart rate, nothing serious. And we had a combination of those. So we started, doing this kind of research and letting people know that when you have that anxiety attack, simply remove yourself from the environment. If it goes away, then chances are it's not a heart attack, because that heart attack isn't going to go away. So it really gives some support to people who are having these symptoms, and they think they're going crazy because they don't know what's causing on the sudden anxiety attack. But it could be something in their environment.
What can be done, other than what you've talked about with filters and so forth, what can be done for people who are electrically hypersensitive?
Well, once again, I interact with a lot of doctors to find out how they're treating their patients, because there are a number of doctors who recognize this as a problem and are actually dealing with it in a very, wise way. 4 things have to happen when someone is electrically hypersensitive. And by the way, these symptoms can be reversed, so you don't have to live with it for the rest of your life, which is really good news. The first thing that you have to do is you have to remove yourself from the exposure. In order to do this, you have to know what you're exposed to. And there are now a growing number of courses that are teaching, that are training people to do these kinds of measurements. And one group is called the Building Biologists, and they're all over North America. So if you look up building biologists, the one nearest you, chances are you'll find someone who can come in and do monitoring in your home. People can do their own monitoring, but they need to have various types of meters. So, to buy all the meters will be as expensive as getting your home monitored by someone who knows what they're doing. So there's two paths you can take, basically. You can buy the meters and measure your own home and find out what you're exposed to, or you can hire someone to do it. So once you know what you're exposed to, you need to reduce that exposure. If your exposure is to wireless technology, and if that exposure is within your own home, then there's a lot you can do about it. So if you're going on the internet and you're using a Wi-Fi router, then you can simply turn the Wi-Fi off and use an Ethernet connection. So you can still get on the internet, but you have to be plugged in, basically, to an Ethernet cable. If you've got a cordless phone in your home, because they radiate all the time, you have to get rid of it. You have to use a wired phone, the original phones that, we all recall. And you can have more than one in your home, so you can have them in different rooms. If you have a wireless baby monitor, then you're going to expose your infant to that radiation. And this is the one thing that I think is the most disgusting, that in Europe, you can actually buy baby monitors that are sound activated, which means that they're not radiating until the infant makes a sound, and then they send a message to the parent monitor, and the parent comes, checks on the infant. We can't import those to North America. They're illegal to import. The FCC has banned them. And so the ones that we have in North America are constantly emitting microwave radiation. So it's really important to put these receivers away from your infant, not put it right next to the crib, and to get shielding fabric that you put over the crib to prevent the microwaves from reaching the infant. The sound will, it'll still emit a sound, it'll still be a way of protecting your child, but you don't want your infant exposed to microwave radiation at that young age, or probably any age. So there are things that you can do, in some cases simply by changing the technology you have in your home. You can shield things with fabric. The fabric contains silver fiber in it, so it's quite expensive, surrounded by cotton fiber, so it looks quite attractive, and the metal isn't directly next to your skin. And you can put a canopy around your bed on all sides, like a Faraday cage, if you're living in an environment where you can't control the wireless technology. So if you happen to be living with a cell tower very close to your home, then you can't turn that off. So you can now shield it with fabric. You can put the fabric, use it as curtains on your wall, or you can, put a canopy around your bed on the top and on the bottom so that you're living in a Faraday cage, basically, when you're sleeping. And that will reduce the radiation. There's also paint that you can buy. It's a carbon-based paint, and that will reflect some of the radiation as well. It's about 90 to 95% effective. So you can reduce your exposure in your own home by using this type of technology. There's also a film that you can put on your windows. So if you don't want to use curtains, you can your windows are going to be much more permeable to the radiation than concrete or brick, although it comes through concrete and brick. And if you put this film on your windows, you will cut back on some of the radiation. So these are what people are doing. There's even clothing that's being manufactured where there's a silver lining within a jacket, for example, or a vest. And so that's one way that you can protect your body. And they're putting these linings inside baseball caps. So if you're a hat on or a baseball cap on, then you're protecting your brain from the radiation. People have gone to incredible extremes to shield themselves from the wireless technology. The filters work on the wired, dirty electricity, and then when it comes to low-frequency magnetic fields, simply staying away from equipment in your home that generates these magnetic fields is the solution. And the things that generate magnetic fields are often things that heat up. So if you have an electric stove, that will generate it. If you use an electric blanket to heat your bed, that will have a magnetic field associated with it. If you sleep on a waterbed, although I think they're not very popular these days, because that has a heater in the waterbed, that will generate a magnetic field. And ideally, you want to have your bedroom as the cleanest environment in your home, because that's when your body is healing. So if you make sure that your bedroom is super duper clean, doesn't have any electronic devices near it, you don't have even lights plugged in because they'll still give off an electric field when they're plugged in but not turned on, then your body's likely to recover. So the very first thing is to minimize your exposure. The second thing that you have to do is you have to build up your immune system. Your immune system, your adrenals are now so exhausted that they're not helping your body in any way. And so I don't give advice about this because I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD. And so I tell people to go to a healthcare practitioner they trust, someone who can actually help find out what their deficiencies are, build up their immune system so they become nice and strong. And this will help with their multiple chemical sensitivity as well, and if with any kind of, parasites or, viruses that they have in their body, just becoming stronger internally. The third thing they need to do is they need to detoxify their body. So if they have mercury fillings, those fillings have to be removed. They're leaking mercury constantly when you eat, when you use a cell phone. There was a study done with co-eds that showed that when they used their cell phone, that the mercury levels in their saliva were much higher because the cell phone actually mobilizes mercury. And a friend of mine who happened to have the misfortune of being in Vietnam and was working with radios there, he said the soldiers had to have their fillings replaced every 6 months because the fillings would start shrinking, and that was because the radio frequencies they were exposed to was dissolving the mercury and making it mobile in their body. So it was, increasing their toxic mercury load basically every time they were exposed to the radiation. And that's happening now when we use cell phones. So detoxifying your body, and once again, I recommend you go to someone who knows how to do this, and whether you use chelation or saunas or whatever therapy, that you do it on a prolonged basis so that you really clean out your system. And the final thing that you need to do is you need to deal with the emotional stress that all of this radiation causes. If you're the only one in your family who knows that the television is on in a room because you're getting a mild headache, everyone else in your family who doesn't have the same symptoms will start thinking you're crazy. And doctors who are unsympathetic and have no knowledge of this will come to the same conclusion. And I know a lot of people who are electrically hypersensitive who told me that their doctors recommended they go see a psychiatrist. And psychiatrists are talking to me, telling me they're being sent patients who have no psychological problems at all. Their problems are physiological. So we really need to have better communication among, healthcare providers. And so this symptom of reducing your exposure, improving your immune system, detoxifying your body, and dealing with some of the emotional stress, I call RIDE, R-I-D-E. And if you deal with all of those different symptoms, then you're likely to have pretty good recovery. Not immediately, not necessarily, but over a period of time, your body will improve. And some of it is simply getting rid of your thinking about the technology, thinking that, okay, I'm exposed, I'm going to be hurt. Your thoughts are actually causing some of the damage as well. So realizing that you're incredibly powerful, your body's incredibly strong, it can heal itself, and you just have to believe in that, and that will help with the healing process.
It sounds as if this information is not only good for patients and the population as a whole, but also for practitioners. They need to know what they're dealing with and what are the causes of a patient's problems.
They do need to know that. So we really need to have this education in medical schools. That's going to take a while because we know what controls medical schools, and the fact that, they're really being trained to use chemicals to deal with symptoms. And even the role of the environment in medical schools isn't properly discussed. So, if you're living in a dirty environment, you're going to become sick, whether that dirt is mold or chemicals or electromagnetic pollution. Now, one of the things that doctors, my recommendation for doctors is that they really have to listen to their patients and their symptoms. And if they have I can send you a list of symptoms that you can put on your website if you like, of what the primary symptoms are of electrosensitivity, and then what the different devices are that produce it or contribute to it. And if doctors were to ask their patients, a list of these questions, just tick, 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 and do you have a cell phone in your home? Do you use a cell phone? Do you use a cordless phone? Do you have Wi-Fi? Do you leave it on all night? and just simply get their patients to turn things off at night and see if that improves some of their symptoms, if they sleep better, if they wake up with less pain. If they do, then chances are there's a connection between the two of those things. There's also a guideline that was published just this year. It's by a European EMF group that consists of a number of different scientists and doctors, and it's called European EMF Guideline 2016 for the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of electromagnetic field-related health problems and illnesses. And it's published and it's peer-reviewed, and I can give you the link that you can put on your website so that people can actually, doctors as well as patients, can download that information and see what they have to say.
Well, we'll certainly put all those links on our site, clarifiedhealth.com, and also I'm going to have a link to where people can get these filters and the other devices, the paints and the fabrics that can help protect them if they feel like they want to have better health and if they're very electrosensitive.
There's a very good site in the United States, in New York, that's called lessemf.com. So it's www.lessemf.com. They sell meters, they sell filters, they sell paint, screening, all of the things I've mentioned. So people, that's a one-stop shop that they can go to.
Wonderful. Well, this has been very, very informative, not only for our audience, I'm sure, but for me as well. I knew it was a problem, but you have certainly expanded my thinking on this and realized that many of my patients are suffering from these kinds of issues.
That's what I hear from doctors too, Bob, that I interact with. They tell me, I think at least a third or 50% of my patients are suffering from electrosensitivity. And when they do the normal treatments that you've been used to doing, where you used to get success, you're not being successful anymore because they're going back into a toxic environment. And actually, German physicians back, I think it was in 2002 or 2004, put out an appeal saying, please improve the guidelines because we can't treat our patients. They're not recovering. They're going back to a toxic environment. So we're being less effective as caregivers as a result. So I think probably that, once you're, sick and you're going to a doctor, chances are at least 50% of your patients are going to be partially impacted by the electrosmog in their environment.
And a different way to look at this also is you don't just have to be dealing with patients who have problems, but also this is a way to improve performance and get people to even the higher level of what they're doing.
Exactly, yeah. And actually that leads us on to some of the healing therapies that are being used by athletes to improve their performance. So we can talk about some other time.
I think we're going to have another talk on that. But for now, I want to thank you so much. This has been very informative, and I'm sure I'll get some very favorable feedback from our listeners. So thank you very much, Dr. Havas, and we'll talk very shortly.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Vital 100. Please check out our website, vital100wellness.com, for other ways to listen to our podcast, as well as additional health resources. If you have questions for Dr. Bob, or if you have feedback or recommendations for the podcast, please send an email to info@vital100wellness.com.